Hello and welcome back to another episode of Patrox Radio. I'm your host, Patrox, and today I wanted to tackle a very general topic, but one that is very important not to me just day to day, but important in everything that we do and how we're going to move forward in a more climate conscious community, in a society that focuses on our actions. I find that in general, the best answer to dealing with waste as an individual is to lessen all consumption. However, this unfortunately seems to be harder for for some people to really understand. So first, let's cover the basics that everyone has heard: reduce, reuse, and recycle. This trio is something that's been spouted to us since we were kids, and even then, probably to our parents whenever they were still in school. All of these are well known and done by people to varying degrees, but I want to try to set up a mental example that I use to think about all of these together. Consider a box, if you will. This box will represent your environment and what you can consider your responsibility. So the things that you use, the things that you buy, the things that are technically what you own is your responsibility. We could expand this from this point to explain the relationship with the community and the environment, but that's not important at the moment. So for this example, let's look at your box. uh, Items will always need to come in, like food and water, but beyond that, our needs are different and our products are often wrapped in needless amounts of plastic packaging as extra points for marketing tactics. Easy enough answer here is to reduce your general consumption. However, being specific and picky about the products you get based on certain variables can also be good. This is something I personally like to do, and I'll probably pick up more on that a bit later. Say you shop local and many of the produce is wrapped in plastic. So long as the food was locally grown and harvested, it may fit the bill for you starting out. I personally buy glass and metal anything as long as I can, like soda specifically. If I can avoid a plastic bottle by seeing a glass bottle or an aluminum can, those are usually the options I try to go for. A minor example. Things that aren't food can be hit or miss with options, so secondhand stores become my best option all around. This goes doubly so for electronics and for clothing, and I cannot harp on that one enough. But let's go to the next stage. We talked about reducing, but reuse, in my opinion, is the biggest obstacle to tackle as a society and even as an individual. When plastic was first introduced, people did not originally throw the products away. People began to accumulate a lot of things, or they stopped buying plastic products because they didn't need anymore. And this really hampered a lot of the financial incentives for or for business owners at the time to really invest in it. So what did they do? Uh, Hold on. Instead, people held on to them like they did with any other household items that wasn't food or water. It took years of massive ad campaigns early on to get consumers used to the single-use plastic idea. Forgive me, I misread a typo that I had in my notes, so I apologize. Uh, this was where we must work the hardest to challenge ourselves with our perception of any item that enters your box. Always ask, what else am I capable of doing with this? Options can be endless depending on your willingness, and I truly believe that. Now, many of you probably already know that our global and local recycling systems are often not economically viable, and depending on materials, degrades the material substantially when recycling it. This is very true for plastic. With all that being said, it is still important to learn how to recycle best depending on the circumstances present. It would take communal restructuring of our recycling processes and the removal of a profit motive and replace it with a needs based system to get to the point that I think we can accurately and responsibly use an item like plastic, even though I still think it shouldn't be used, produced, or distributed. In relation to the box in our example, it is like waste, as in it is what comes out of your environment. But it takes your initial decision to limit what you bring in and reusing what you can to decide what happens next to your waste. Are you going to willingly contribute to the problem of landfills or burn piles, or are you going to give this material a second chance? Are you going to let it at least try? Let's refresh all that real quick. Your box is your environment. Items come in, and you have the choice to choose how you use it, and then it's later removed. In each of these steps, we have the general option to limit what comes in or be critical of what comes in, reuse what you already have in your box, and the responsibility of how to handle your waste. According to the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, in 2021, 64% of all the waste in Texas was municipal waste, which falls into type 1 landfills here. There are currently anywhere from 99 to 157 landfills in the state that will take this type of waste. Imagine how many beers and soda cans are in there, disposable bags, cups of coffee, just cups, coffee pods, etc., or glass jars from sauces, or broken ceramics. There's a lot of things in here that can be recycled, and it isn't. And for anybody who doesn't understand municipal waste just means the things that we throw away in our garbage bags, the thing that we take to, trash pickup or to the company trash site or whatever it is. That's what we mean when we say municipal waste. You'll also see it as municipal solid waste, or MSW. If you like to do your own research as I do. Um, all of that waste obviously could be reused and repurposed long before it gets there and long after. But let's look at the most common materials we interact with and what we can be reusing or recycled. None of this is even brought up organic material and how all of these things break down or fail to. One of the things I wanted to make sure I remembered was that methane production is a major problem in landfills, and then that usually happens when we allow organic material to just get thrown away. This is your food. This is any yard clippings or scraps or anything like that. This could even be clothing if it's made out of cotton. As it degrades and is stuck in a landfill, it doesn't get reintroduced into the soil and is therefore part of a production of methane gas. So even though cows are a massive problem with that, and all the lies about natural gas saying how it's sustainable, even though it's methane gas primarily, we're also producing this harmful gas in our own landfills because we refuse to be critical of how we handle our waste. But let's get into some of the major categories. We got plastics, we got metals, we got glass, and we have our organic materials. I did also want to talk about e-waste by the end of this, just because it is an important thing to cover. But of course, let's go into what we know the most about plastic at the moment. Here we find the most familiar enemy of our environmental endeavors. As most people should know, there are generally 7 types of plastics used most often in every household and industry. You have type 1 plastic known as polyethylene terephthalate. You'll also see it listed as PET or PETE. Uh, Type 1 plastic is luckily a widely recycled product, but its versatility makes it really hard to deal with the larger issue of getting off plastic and oil. Its uses in bottles, bags, and protective barriers for our food is a large part of what built our modern life, but like everything, we reap what we sow. Type 2 plastic, also known as high density polyethylene, is a sturdier and more chemically resistant plastic used in jugs for everything from milk to motor oil to lids for most bottles, playground equipment to even the trash and recycling bins themselves. Uh, Also, one of the easiest plastics to recycle, both in a recycling center and by yourself if you're one of those people who like to make handmade crafts. Type 3 is another versatile plastic used. PVC, also known as polyvinyl chloride, is one you're probably most familiar with as water pipes in various applications, but it's also used in door and window frames. And I believe that vinyl press shirts use the same type of plastic as a very thin sheet, but is rigid enough to live in quite a few washes. It is also notoriously under recycled and difficult to reuse and recycle. Uh, it's PVC and what was it? Polystyrene are like two of the hardest to recycle for a variety of reasons. And I think PVC is only beaten out by polystyrene. But before we get to that, let's get to number four. LDPE, type 4 plastic, also known as low density polyethylene, is similar in chemical composition to HDPE, type 2 plastic, but it's the simplest to make and the cheapest to produce, making it a common choice for items like six pack rings, plastic bags, and plastic wrap. Plastic wrap, especially. Due to how cheap it is to produce, there is little market incentive to recycle it, making Type 4 plastic one of the least found in recycling bins. Really sad news, but it happens, and this is something that I think like legislation is needed in order to curb the use of plastics like this when it's cheaper and easier just to make it than to deal with recycling and the aftermath of it is just it's difficult. Type 5 plastic, polypropylene, is also like one of those versatile plastics that everyone knows. Even if you don't know, you know it. This, again, like HDPE, is used to make containers for motor oil, certain jugs for liquids, but also is used to make specific types of caps for squeeze bottles. They use what's known as the living hinges kind of method, and it's the one that has I like to say it looks like a little bow tie on the back of the cap, but that's those bottle caps that you can open up and the cap stays onto the lid, like your ketchup or mayo, squeeze mayo, because that's something I use a lot of. It's in those kind of bottles. So that again is another popular one to use. It's also used in a lot of car engine parts and other things that are able to uh, need to be able to withstand normal high heat temperatures, so nothing above 120 degrees, I believe, and it's able to withstand a lot of fatigue, which is why it's used in the living hinges uh, part. But it's also used in car manufacturing for that very reason. Type number six, polystyrene, is, in my opinion, one of the worst plastics. Not only because of its near impossibility to recycle, but just its prevalence in everyday life. This is your takeout containers. This is your styrofoam cups. I forgot to mention, styrofoam, as it's most commonly known, is actually the product name from a company who was initially selling this product. But polystyrene, also known as styrofoam, is used in all kinds of stuff from packaging to installation to single-use dinnerware with cups and plates and stuff like that. Your clamshell containers. It is everywhere, especially in the food industry and the shipping industry, which makes it one of the most out there plastics that is constantly broken because these little beads can get broken off from it and just distributed in every system, and there's no easy way to actually recycle it, and there's no useful way to use up all that styrofoam as is. So one of the worst in my opinion, and I'm very glad that LA County actually banned its use now, or banned I think its use, or they banned the selling of styrofoam in the county, or something like that. I don't quite remember. And then number seven, type seven, is other. This is every other plastic that is used commercially that doesn't have such a widespread use. So you could think of any of like the specific types of plastics that they may use on eyeglass frames, or a specific type of plastic that they may have to use in, tools that can withstand whatever the environment is, like high electricity or high heat or high impact. I don't know. But this is for the plastics that don't have such dominating widespread use. So anything with the number seven, I believe a lot of the times it's reused to make composite materials because there is no way to refine these specific types of plastics there is in a cost-effective manner, I believe. But that's plastics in a nutshell. The next one, the oldest material that I think we've used for the most part, aside from rocks, is metal. Now, when I originally was writing this out, I had spitballed what I thought was the seven most common metals. I got six of them right. The seven metals that are most commonly used and sought after for recycling purposes are aluminum, brass, copper, gold, silver, steel or iron too, and the one that I got wrong, lead. We are still using and reusing so much lead nowadays, which I'll touch on that one personally later because I still think that that's actually kind of stupid and hazardous. Um, but gold and silver are very obvious, both in its use in jewelry and its historical presence in coins and religious or symbolic uses. But they actually have some good industry qualities that make them good. Silver is used for electrical contacts and for very specific batteries that are used in all kinds of applications. Now we're talking silver zinc batteries and silver cadmium batteries. Gold has even wider uses for, of course, jewelry and coinage, but it also has a great electrical connector history. But it's also used in artificial limb joints. It's used in dentistry and computer and electronic circuitry. Uh, so, two very valuable metals that have long-standing history with us. We have steel and iron, it's actually the most sought after metal right now, even though scrapping it winds up getting you the least per pound. But this is one of those metals that is kind of, it shines a light onto the state of our consumption because we actually recycle more steel and iron than ever before, and it's very easy to, it's very cost effective too. And most people believe currently, if you're an expert in economics and all the related fields about this, that we still need to buy and produce more, raw iron and steel. We need to still make more because the demand for it in building and construction is still higher than what recycling can supply, which is really shitty, honestly, because that just says, hey, we're building too much, in my opinion. That we need to like get back. We need to chill the fuck out. We're doing too much here. Of course, copper and brass also have, long-standing history. Copper, of course, is one of those metals that you'll see all the time if you're like me and watch a lot of scrapping videos for fun. That seems to be the number one thing I find all the time if it's not brass or aluminum. Copper is used in still almost everything with the wires that are in almost every part of our life. There's the wires in the wall to the wires in your charger, wires that are going to be used in motors, any kind of motors. What I did not know was is also used in roofing, but of course it's used in plumbing and it's used in cookware, making a very versatile material to use. Brass, of course, has a lot of similar uses, but a lot of its focuses are more with locks, marine engines, out valve guides, door lock components, instruments, and lamp and plug fixtures. So like the little ends of your bulbs that you screw in, that's screwing into a brass, fitting. Aluminum, of course, aluminum is everywhere. It's in our soda cans, it's in our window frames, cooking pots, it's, some food packaging. You use it, in boating and aircraft materials. You can use it for the power lines, for the overhead power lines. Like, it is a very well used material. But there is, the number seven, the number one thing that I did not expect to see here was lead. Now, lead, the first thing I'm using a website that tells me about the purposes for why people scrap them. And one of the first things that is listed here is pipes. And that scares me because historically we have used a lot of leaded pipes or lead lined pipes, and lead is known to lead to a series of deteriorating brain function, and it's scary to see that it's still listed for piping as an acceptable thing to be reused for. But it is also used for things like gutters, downspouts, conductor heads, ammunition, cable sheathing, weights for lifting, weight belts for diving, and radiation protection. Now, some of those I feel are great, but if it has to deal with water, I don't think that this is something we should be using. Just a personal note there, just saying. But all of these all suffer from one critical issue that glass will also suffer from, and plastic too. With the recycling process as is, the demand for certain materials requires that imperfections be kept to as close to zero as possible. And to ensure that, there is usually a margin or a marginal range of error that materials have to be within in order to consider to still be usable. Say I need a an aluminum frame that can withstand X amount of weight and pressure from all sides. But if I have a metal frame that breaks before that because of the amount of impurities that are in it, it won't be usable. So it's not like you can just take all the aluminum and throw it in there, because I don't believe that in almost any application there is one specific metal that is used instead of an alloy. Steel by itself is an alloy. Brass by itself is an alloy. Copper, aluminum, different types of steels all have different makeups with different metals in order to give it different characteristics. This is why, something like aircraft aluminum is going to be very different from door frame aluminum. It's not designed to withstand the same job. So when you grab a bunch of these raw materials, or not raw materials, I'm sorry, a bunch of these recycled and reclaimed materials, and you get them to these sites, yes, it is cheaper to refine it. It is cheaper to process this instead of digging it out and refining like bauxite to make aluminum. It is cheaper than mining iron ore straight up and burning a shitload of fossil fuels just to make, raw steel. But if you don't have a good way of sorting impurities out from what the end user is going to want or need, the incentive to back these kind of projects are going to continue to drop or not be there. So refinement in sorting processes for any of these type of recycling systems is fundamentally important. The easier it becomes to sort out the different materials, the different sub materials, if you will, if you want to think like this, in these sets of categories, it will help in long-term downstream economic problems, because then you have a better, more refined way to get specific materials to fit with the requirements that your customer needs. But it also ensures that we aren't losing materials that could otherwise be needed down the line. Um, I was thinking of a good example and I was losing it. So let's just move on to the next one. Glass. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit, the second I was doing some research on glass, I immediately kind of backed out. I backed away and I didn't want to do it because, unlike plastic and metals, glass isn't neatly separated into like 4 or 5 types of glass that is commercially used. Because glass has two things about it that make it pretty interesting. It can be recycled 100% without any loss of purity or quality. And due to uh, different physical conditions, you can also change the way that glass will react and how glass is used. And that's before we even talk about chemically changing, silicate-based glass. Um, so, in a broad stroke, I will say this about glass. Glass at its base is made out of silicate sand. There are different applications by which glass is produced for different processes. In general, most glass that can be recycled comes from drinking glass and I believe window panes from any variety. Um, Drinking glasses need to be sorted out by color because most of the consumers that are wanting to buy recycled glass do care about the quality of color. So, knowing that glass will retain its color after it is reused into something else means that you don't want to bleed the colors in with anything else. So, sorting still matters. But this gets infinitely harder when you introduce things like borosilicate glass or things like Pyrex, things like ovenware, things like if it was like an aircraft window or something. These are made with different systems and different chemical compositions, like different plastics, to suit different needs. However, glass is a lot more diverse in how it's able to do this, making recycling glass that much harder. There is one project that I'll probably highlight in a future episode coming out of Louisiana where they are trying to take glass, crush it down to reintroduce it into the environment as a way to replace the sand that we are using, since we're consuming more sand than can be naturally produced by the world. Um, I think the EPA said it was so far viable, but they gave them a grant to test it further to ensure that this project was something that was actually beneficial to the Louisiana coastline. So it's something I haven't personally done a lot of research into yet. I just got a glimpse of it and I wanted to keep my eyes on it. But last but not least is organic waste. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this is one of those things that leads to a lot of problems in landfills, mostly with the production of methane gas because of our rotting organic materials. Now, this could be anything from your food to certain clothes to certain, products like, I'm losing the word here, like sofas or dressers. If they have wood in them, or they're made out of like composite board or stuff, that will break down, and we will run into this very problem. So things like cardboard and paper can be recycled and reused, but they have something else. They have the ability to break down, which brings me to composting. Now, I personally am very into composting. I like the idea, and I'm still learning about it. I'm still practicing and trying to figure out where I'm fucking up and what I'm doing right with my own system at home. But this is a great way to deal with organic waste that isn't going to be reused in any way. Um, if you like to say food scraps or whatever, if there was a small town that had a communal composting site where they took all of their organic waste, not only do you have a great way to feed your plants and surrounding land, but you've also ensured that you directly kept away X amount of weight of material that would have otherwise produced methane and done nothing to help the planet. So a lot of things could be said here. A lot of things that I feel like deserves its own episode to cover this. Uh, but before we sign off and go on about the rest of our lives, I did want to mention e-waste. I did mention I want to mention e-waste because this is one of the greatest singular impacts of an item, if you will. Electronics as an item of things that we throw away, in my opinion, has the worst impacts, not only because of the inability for us to reuse things, but the ways in which it pollutes the land with its own heavy metals. The PVC boards have no great way of being reused or recycled in any way. The harvesting methods that a lot of citizens in a lot of poorer countries that are not in the developed core, when they try to harvest things like the gold and silver or any electrical components on there, not only do they often damage these in the attempt, but they are exposed to fumigated metals, things like solder that's vaporized into the air. These things directly poison these people who are trying in their own way to deal with the waste that winds up in their own lands, often not by their own choices. Um, it is, without a doubt, in my opinion, the single biggest problem without any direct answer to. At least with everything else, you have some form of recycling, reducing, or reusing that could help. But with e waste, there isn't a good answer to deal with the direct waste that comes from that. Nothing from the plastic that's covering all of our devices to the electrical equipment that runs it. And that's not good. It's not helpful or beneficial. That's why until there is a good answer of how to deal with this waste, and even then, I think the best thing that we can do to try to tackle that specific problem is simply reuse your technology, extend the life of your technology. Don't let it break. Buy secondhand if someone's selling what you're looking for. You just got to try, you know. I could go on and on and on about more specifics, but these are things that would take a lot more time to research them properly and do these specific categories justice. I wanted to just highlight the general topic because, of course, I feel like it's important. And even if most people understand and already know, there are still some people who don't. There may be kids or teenagers who don't know any of this who might find this. I hope you guys learn a lot and can really get encouraged to ask these questions on your own. What are you capable of doing with this? How is this going to end up? How is this going to break down? Or is it going to end up not breaking down because of where it's at? Important questions, important pursuits, and things that I think we should encourage the youth to really care about. Now, I can ramble on as I usually like to do, but I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to leave you guys with one question. Something to think about, something for you guys to work on in your own personal lives. I want you guys to think about every item that comes into your own little box now and really think about everything that's going to happen to that. Is it a box of tea or is it a new PlayStation 5 for some reason? Think about it. How is every piece of what you're using, not just the specific thing you're buying it for, how is all of that going to get used? The container, the wrapping, the paper instructions or whatever, the twist ties and everything, all of that. It's going to be annoying. It's going to be tedious, but it's going to be important and it's going to change the world. One person at a time. Just remember, guys, Mama Terra loves you. And I hope you all have a great day.
Tongue-tied in the rain, soaked to my toes, got the chills to the bone. Cold stare through the haze, shrill in my voice and my lungs swell with pain. Call me out by my name, speak to me soft, help me gather my thoughts. Drown it out, plug the drain. Turn the record over, it can't be over. Ah, 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 ah. Write me when you get there, to that better place where you can think straight. Send me love if you can. Manifest the best of your wildest fantasies. I hope you find what you need. Over the hills, sun sets in the trees, soak in the glorious rays. The sun will be out, beating down on your shoulders. Tie a rope round my waist as I venture into the dark. I'll be back by the time you finally know where you are. Tear my ego apart. We are all we are, and we are all but one. Send me up to the stars. The distance between means nothing to me, or bury me in the sand. After I've done for you all that I can, I'll tell you what I knew, but I've got no concept of what I'll know. Leave a breadcrumb trail for the way